Sacrifice, survival, and moral dilemmas are among the most prevalent philosophical topics in our history. Throughout time, these topics have come about repeatedly in politics, ethics studies, and even from ancient scriptures. We'll be exploring how these ideas are portrayed in arguably one of the most philosophically complex TV shows ever, Monster, and ask ourselves, was Dr. Tenma right to save Johan? But first, we must understand what these philosophical concepts are, and if we have any concrete answers to them in the first place. Among other philosophers who have studied these issues, the perspective of Susan Wolf tends to be one of the most concise and popular theories about the topic. To explore her perspective, we must first put ourselves in our own moral dilemma. Let's say that there are two people trapped in rooms rigged with explosives. However, you only have enough time to save one. One of these people is a stranger, and one of these is a lifelong partner, whether it be your husband, wife, or whoever. What is the correct decision to make? Who should you save? Well, according to Wolf, she believes the obvious choice to be your partner. This is because our motivation does not solely derive from moral rationality. Wolf believes that even thinking, I should save my wife because it is my duty as her husband to do so, as one thought too many. She believes that over-intellectualizing the scenario takes away from aspects that make us human, and that the only reason you should have to take this action is, I'll save my wife because she is my wife and I care about her. Wolf's main idea is that morality shouldn't replace personal attachments, and that our personal attachments are what we must not let go of. Take this theory and compare it to the likes of the standard view, and you'll immediately find huge differences in what makes somebody a moral person or a moral decision maker. The standard view says a moral person will base a decision completely on moral reasoning and rationality, and not at all based on personal relationships. Going back to the first moral dilemma, the standard view states that the morally rational person would not choose their partner just because of any personal relationship they may have with this person. That the morally righteous person would leave it to a 50-50, maybe a coin flip. However, the pluralistic view is the more popular of the two. It says that moral values are very important, but far from the only values, and that the good person will not let moral values be the sole dictator of their decisions. This sides more with the view of Wolf in that it states taking personal relationships into account is also very important for the sake of making righteous decisions. Monster is a series in which the protagonist, Dr. Kenzo Tenma, works as a neurosurgeon in Dusseldorf, Germany, which is ran by corrupt hospital director Udo Heinemann. One day when Director Heinemann orders Tenma to save the life of a famous opera singer instead of a Turkish construction worker who came in first, Tenma obeyed the director's order. But the Turkish construction worker died as a result of the other surgeons taking too long to begin treating him. The wife of the Turkish man blames Tenma for his death. Her outburst made Tenma realize that the director developed and approved an unfair system of taking care of patients based on social value. When a similar situation arises, Tenma went on to operate with the young boy with a bullet in his head who came in first, despite his director's order to operate on the mayor who would be conducting the next review of the medical facilities and had promised an increase in the hospital's budget. He saves the boy, and because of his decision to operate on the boy, the mayor died. But after losing his spot as head surgeon, many other surgeons at the hospital began unexpectedly dying from poisoning. 10 years later, Tenma has a highly traumatized man under his care, who speaks of a monster. One night, after finding the hospital security guard dead, the man runs for his life, and Tenma chases in pursuit. Unfortunately, the man runs straight towards his death, as he had ran straight towards the monster he had feared all along. And thus, the twist. We learn that the boy Tenma saved through following his heart was a nihilistic master manipulator who has also killed hundreds of people despite being only 17 years old. Johan, despite being armed, won't actually kill Tenma because of his infatuation with him saving his life, and an even greater infatuation with his philosophy, which is the setup for Monster. When Tenma is faced with the choice of either saving Johan, who was brought in first, and the mayor, who should he have actually chosen? According to the standard view, there's two ways that Tenma could have gone about the situation. Either he could have taken the same route by treating Johan because Johan came into the hospital first, or he could have chosen who to treat by chance. Both would have been acceptable by way of the standard view. However, from perspective of the pluralistic view, saving Johan could be the right move depending on your motivations. The pluralistic view says morality is very important, but there are other motivations and values that someone should have to make a moral decision. However, if saving the mayor was the route that Tenma went, the motivations for doing so would be based on fear of being fired as well as greed. These cannot be considered morally rational reasons to save the mayor, as Tenma would have had to step away from prepping to save Johan and go and save the mayor instead. With the added motivation that Tenma had to do what he felt was most morally justifiable, the pluralistic view points towards saving Johan as the best option. As for Tenma's philosophy, he shows many times throughout the show that he believes all lives to be equally important, meaning he would not step away from Johan to perform surgery on the mayor. In the end, after all the dust settles, Johan is shot in the head, but still clinging to life. But now Tenma must once again make a decision that will put all of his moral philosophy to the ultimate test. Johan had spent the entirety of the show trying to make Tenma kill him in an attempt to prove to Tenma that he'll have to make a decision that shows not everyone deserves an equal chance at life. Even after all the atrocities that Johan has committed, Tenma still has a chance to prove himself right in the end, but only through risking the lives of countless others through letting the world's smartest mass-murdering manipulator live to see another day. And in the end, Tenma saves Johan, and ultimately, Tenma's philosophy wins. However, what would you do in this situation, even if you know that saving this person could and has ended countless lives? Does his life mean that much? Standard View would argue that yes, it would, because judging off purely objective moral rationality, you should always try and save a life if you can, and what they choose to do with that life is simply not in your control. But from the pluralistic view, you may have motivation to not act entirely out of moral rationality for many reasons. For one, by saving Johan, you may carry guilt for making a decision that leads to more harm and suffering than good. If you know this person's living will only lead to more innocent people being harmed, then subjectively, letting Johan die could be a more moral decision. Pluralistic view would back this decision because although moral rationality is involved, the motivations and personal connections and consequences made by a decision is completely subjective to the person, and thus would back up the option to let Johan die. Tenma's philosophy mostly reflects the standard view, and what I mean by that is that Tenma has this objective view purely based on moral rationality that all lives are equal and that if there is a chance to save a life, effort should absolutely be made to do so. This aligns with the standard view as it's only based on moral reasoning. However, the actions he takes in the show as Johan tries to break Tenma make him fall into a less objective, more pluralistic view. Pluralistic view could justify doing a less objectively moral thing, such as killing this man, depending on your motivations. Tenma hunts Johan down throughout most of the story in an attempt to end his life, all while being on the run from police after state charges him with the murder of the doctors that Johan had killed 10 years before. Johan had not only essentially ruined Tenma's life, but ruined the lives of so many more, and was doing so at one point for the sole purpose of getting Tenma to stray further away from his beliefs. But in the end, Tenma goes back to the moral rationality that made him save Johan in the first place, and that is the beauty of this story. In a moment of realization, he understands that saving anybody he can is his moral duty as a neurosurgeon, and what they choose to do with their lives is not up to him. Tenma believes truly that all lives are equal and worth saving, even if the person he is saving is the innocent boy shot in the head, or the mass murderer who has tormented his life.